They don't see us yet, do they?
It's on.
It's on?
Yes.
Amazing. All right.
Here we are.
Hello, world. Hi, everyone who's here in person, but everybody on the stream as well. Warm welcome. This is my first hybrid meetup or conference, mini conference even.
Mine as well.
Mine as well. Wow. Well, first of all, we're at SvelteKit here in Stockholm. If you don't know it, it's an IT consultancy. We used to say it's the sweet spot between user experience meeting technology. We do love modern technologies. That's why we brought Svelte Society here. And a few weeks ago, we had a craft day. Sometimes we have lectures, sometimes we have mob programming. And we selected a few of the modern web frameworks, and out of about 25 or so developers, 20 of them chose to work with Svelte. So that just shows how popular it's becoming. Other than that, well, I might also introduce myself. I'm Andre. I'm a tech lead at BMW here for SvelteKit. And I'm also a lead of our front-end craft circle. So we do have lunch and learns and different occasions like these as well, where we learn and share knowledge. And some of the clients we work with is BMW, SAS, SJ, the rail company. Some practical details. Maybe the people on remote don't have to care about that, but the emergency exits are there and there. Bathrooms are there and there. It's unfortunate that we don't have so big celebrities like we had at Svelte Summit with Rich Harris, and well, Kevin is a bit of a celebrity nowadays, but
I don't know about that.
At least we have good Wi-Fi. They don't have that in the bars in New York.
Yeah, that's right.
If you saw Svelte Summit, you know what I'm talking about. In any case, hand over to you.
Yeah, welcome everyone to this Svelte Summit mini edition Stockholm. It's the first of a couple of smaller events that will follow the main Svelte Summit event, where we'll show a bunch of different interesting talks. So I guess we'll get started. So the first talk is an introduction to SvelteKit by Ekene from Netlify.
Should we also mention that after all these talks, we will do a short Q&A between us with what's going on in the Svelte Society and what else? We'll be having our eyes on the chat as well. So if you on remote have questions, feel free to ask them there. We'll make sure to answer them, right?
Yeah, of course. Any questions are welcome.
Cool. All right.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for having me today. I'll be talking about unlocking developer superpowers with SvelteKit, and that is because I do believe, in fact, that SvelteKit gives you superpowers, and you will see how just very shortly. Developing with SvelteKit means that you can do more with less, and that means
Yeah, so it's not a real Svelte Summit without technical issues, so bear with us.
From experience.
you can write. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for having me today. I'll be talking about unlocking developer superpowers with SvelteKit, and that is because I do believe, in fact, that SvelteKit gives you superpowers, and you will see how just very shortly. Developing with SvelteKit means that you can do more with less, and that means you can. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for having me today. I'll be talking about unlocking developer superpowers with SvelteKit, and that is because I do believe, in fact, that SvelteKit gives you superpowers, and you will see how just very shortly. Developing with SvelteKit means that you can do more with less, and that means you can write more code with fewer lines of code. It means you can spend less energy and consequently less time when you're building applications with SvelteKit. I'll generally be talking about this topic under the general theme of the best of both worlds, which is something that I think that SvelteKit gives you out of the box. All right, let's go into it. My name is Ekene Eze. I'm at Kenny_IO on Twitter and pretty much everywhere else on social media. I work as a developer experience engineer at Netlify, and I have a YouTube channel where I create Jamstack tutorials, Vue development tutorials, Nox.js, basically all the things that I know about web development using JavaScript, Nox, Jamstack technologies, and so on. So if those kind of things interest you, please do take a look and let me know if you have any questions or feedback. Moving on, what you will learn today, what I want to be talking about through the course of this presentation is what is SvelteKit and what's really different about it. I mean, there are other tools and technologies out there that we could possibly be building web applications with, but what is SvelteKit? Why should you care? We'll be talking about that and why I'm particularly so excited about it. You might have already noticed that I am very excited about using Svelte.js and SvelteKit to build applications, and I'll dig into all of that. I will also be talking about how it improves your life as a software engineer and as a developer, because there are some things that's available in SvelteKit that I think might be lacking in other places, right? We'll talk about all of that. You will also be learning what superpowers you're going to get with SvelteKit, so that's a fun one, and how to extend SvelteKit to like use serverless functions and all of those things that are not available by default. Also, I want this friendship on screen right now. I want it. All right, so let's get started with what is SvelteKit. I'm sure if you take a look at the SvelteKit documentation, you will see a definition that says that it's a framework for building high-performance web applications, right? That's what it is. And I think it's a very simple and straightforward definition that anyone can relate to as far as knowing what a framework is and knowing what building high-performance web applications are. And moving forward, how does it do that? I mean, we've heard just now that it's a framework that helps you build high performance web applications. But how does it help you do that? The first one is it uses Vite under the hood to give you access to build optimizations like CSS code splitting, async chunk loading optimizations, and so on and so forth. It also gives you access to prefetching pages, right? Which means you can prefetch the contents of your page before your users get to that page. So getting content ahead of time, making it readily available before your before users ask for them. It's an amazing feature to have. It has hot module reloading with state preservation. It has offline support if you're using service workers, and it has multiple rendering modes. Like you can get things like SSR, CSR, SSG all out of the box. And how does it then empower you? I mean, with all these features that we've seen, it's impressive, but how does it translate to something that would help you supercharge your productivity as a developer and help you do more in less time, like we talked about, or give you powers that you would ordinarily not have from somewhere else? Simple, it does that by providing you all the different ways of doing things and letting you then choose what works for you. Right, like I mentioned before, some other technologies would go all in on SSR, some would go in on CSR and all of that. Some would say SSG statically generates everything, but that's not the case with SvelteKit, because it gives you all of the options and then just lets you pick what's best for you and roll with it. It also doesn't assume that you know that they know better and therefore enforce any choices on you. That's amazing. I like when I have the option to, consider all the available options. Let me have access to it so that if I decide to go a different way, I'm able to do that. So with respect to that, some of the this or that things that some other frameworks might make you choose that SvelteKit doesn't really make you choose. They kind of like just give you everything, right? And just the choice is up to you, and that I find that to be really powerful. For instance, CSR, SSR, or SSG, like I talked about, this framework doesn't force any one of these on you, but it kind of like gives you everything. As we will see, I'll talk more about this very soon. Static or dynamic, you don't also have to choose one of that. You can go with both or pick one. It's all, you can mix and match as you want. Developer experience or user experience, you don't have to choose. It's all available to you by default. So let's take a closer look at the first one. So one thing I really like about SvelteKit is the fact that you have access to both CSR experience and SSR experience on the same application, right? Because you can server-side render your SvelteKit applications, meaning that you have access to optimizations, to SEO optimizations, because search engines can properly index your site and have it crawled and indexed properly, so you have all the benefits of a good SEO optimized web application. But then also it gives you access to client-side navigation, which means you can navigate through your web application without triggering full page reloads across all your applications. So once again, best of both worlds, right? You have the SSR experience, your SvelteKit application is optimized for SEO, but you also have client-side routing, which makes your navigation just the same experience as you would expect in a typical single-page application. Then it also gives you pre-rendering and SSG, like all these multiple rendering modes are available to you for you to mix and match and choose whatever works for you. And the best thing is it's all available on a per page basis, which means you can decide to render your first page as a CSR, second page SSR. You can pre-render some pages, you can statically generate some pages, or even the entire app. So it's totally all up to you, and that is something I find to be really amazing about SvelteKit. And the next thing is developer experience, right? I mean, SvelteKit offers a very productive and satisfied developer experience, and it does that for me in my own experience, having worked with SvelteKit for a bit, is as when I'm building products with SvelteKit, my experience is fantastic, right? I have adapters, for instance, say that I'm done building my application and I want to deploy this SvelteKit application. I have adapters that will automatically help me, that are natively supported, and help me like get my application to people to start using as quickly as possible. So they have Netlify adapters, for instance, that could help you deploy your SvelteKit applications in like seconds and minutes, right? It has API routes as well, which is something that has become kind of like really popular lately. I mean, we see it in Nox3 that just came out. We saw it in Next.js. It has always been there, and that's something that I think developers like a lot, because it gives you the ability to like use things like middlewares, create API logic, have it within your SvelteKit application. You can make requests to it. It can send you responses. It's a superpower. I mean, it is, right? You can also use serverless functions, as I will show you later in the presentation, in your SvelteKit application. You have hot module reloading, vids, reactive variables, dynamic routing, all these things that modern day development brings to us, that kind of like helps makes our work as developers easier, because we expect to have access to these features and they are all available to you using SvelteKit. But then you don't have to sacrifice your user's experience, right? Like I said, you don't have to choose this or that. You can have everything and then just architect it however you want to suit your own needs, because as we've seen, we have like really good developer experience when you're working with SvelteKit, but you also have amazing user experience. I mean, with all these functional enhancements that are available in SvelteKit, your users will have a stellar experience, irrespective of the fact that developers are having a good experience building with that tool. So you have access to prefetched pages, which means your users can get access to the content of your site even before they get there. So there's no loading bars or spinners or waiting for content to load and all of that. You have client-side routing, which means no full page reloads when you navigate from one page to another page in your SvelteKit application. Users definitely like that, and it gives them a good experience. You have server-side rendered pages, you have fast time to interaction, and all of that available to you out of the box. Once again, the best of both worlds. And let's talk about the last one, static and dynamic, right? Sites built with SvelteKit can be hosted without a dynamic web server, which means you have access to all the benefits of a regular Jamstack application. But that doesn't also mean that you have to sacrifice dynamic functionalities in your SvelteKit application just because you want to generate some pages statically, right? You can use the API routes that we talked about to do some API things, make API calls, fetch data, respond to your clients, and all that. If you even want to take it a step further, you can go ahead and use serverless function providers like Netlify, for instance, to create more enriching experiences for your users, which is something that I'm really looking forward to showing you all in a minute. We'll just go ahead and create a simple SvelteKit application, add some Netlify functions to it, and deploy it to Netlify, and then we'll just test that function to show you that it works. And I will also show you why that might be a good idea, why you would want to consider doing something like that, because I know that SvelteKit gives you API routes by default, so it might not make sense to use serverless functions because you already have API routes. But I just have a few reasons that I will show you as well why you might want to consider going that route. Okay, so this is the SvelteKit documentation, and I'm sure if we go to getting started, we should see all the instructions on how to start up a new SvelteKit application. So I'm just going to do that and do npm init svelte next, and I'm going to call it SvelteKit what now? Let's do Netlify functions. All right, install that, do the skeleton project, no TypeScript, no ESLint, no prettier, and we're good. So now I can change into my SvelteKit Netlify functions folder and open that up in VS Code. All right, so if I run this SvelteKit app, what's the command to run in? Oh my god, I'm putting so many things in view here. Let's get this out of the way. Actually, I can close this up entirely and just use the integrated terminal. Pull that up. The command to run it is npm run dev. So let's do npm run dev. Oh, no. I have to install first. Clear this and do npm install, I think. Yeah, definitely npm install before you run the development server. Okay, now that that is done, I think we can run the development server. Localhost 3000. I think it is running now, so let's do localhost 3000 and welcome to SvelteKit. Good. So our application is running as expected. What I want to do now is go ahead and show you how to add Netlify functions to this small SvelteKit application. So the first thing I want to do is install the Netlify SvelteKit adapter. I'll use PNP to install the adapter, but you can also do like yarn add, right? Oh, sorry. Yarn add like this, but I'm going to go ahead and just paste in the installation using PNP and install it as a development dependency, as a dev dependency. So while that is going on, I'm going to go ahead and create a netlify.toml file, which is where I will put all my Netlify configurations. .toml. All right, and what we need to put inside this file is just the configurations that will tell Netlify how to treat this project. Wait, I'm not sure this is installing correctly. Hang on. Oh, my God, I didn't stop this from running, so I'll just paste this again and click on that. Yeah, now it's working. All right, in our toml file, let's do the build. To say the command to run when you're building this site for production should be npm run build, right? And then the publish directory should also be build. All right, while we are in development mode, the command to run should be SvelteKit. No, I think it's svelte-kit and then dev. It's probably that one. I'll check the package.json file just to be sure. And where's the script? Yes, it's this one, so that's correct. All right, then I want to specify where I want my functions to be. Functions, what am I doing? Okay, and then I'll specify a directory for the functions. So I'll just say let's put it in Netlify /functions. This is not optional. This is where you should be putting your Netlify functions in. Well, in any project that you want to add Netlify functions to, it's required to put it in a Netlify /functions folder. Then I'll select a bundler, and I'll set it to use esbuild because of the performance benefits of building functions with esbuild. It runs way faster when you use the esbuild bundler. Otherwise, you can just leave it out, but why not make it fast? So I'll save that. And the next thing I want to do now that my adapter is successfully installed is go ahead and edit my Svelte configuration file, which is svelte.config.js. So what I want to do is first import the adapter that I just installed, so which is import adapter from, it should be at Svelte. Yep, that one. Thank you, Copilot. And the next thing I want to do is specify what adapter that Svelte should use for this project. So I'm going to set it to the adapter that I just imported, which is this one. All right, so I'll save that. And what else do I need to do? I think that's pretty much it, right? Yeah, that's pretty much it. So let me go ahead and create the folder where I want to put the functions. So I'll do Netlify, then functions. That's it. And just to test this out, let me create a function and just call it like, I don't know, greeting. Yeah, greeting.js. And then just put like the smallest function you've ever seen, basically. It should be this. So it's just an async function that returns good morning. That's it. But you know what? Since we are doing ES6, let's just go ahead and rewrite the function so that it uses the ECMAScript features that Netlify functions currently support. So we can do, instead of doing all that, we can do export async function. Yep, thank you, that's it. Okay, well, look at that. It's safe to say that Copilot wrote this entire function for me. So let's say good morning. And that's it. So I think that's all. Now what should happen is, let me deploy this code and just test that this works. And do git add everything. And I think I created a repo for this here. So yep, this one. So I'm just going to get that. I'm sorry that this is so tiny. I'm going to try and zoom in a bit. Oh, now I zoomed in too much. All right, so I'll paste the origin and I can do git push now. And that should work. If I refresh, I should get that pushed in. Cool. So I'm going to go to my Netlify site. And I'm going to create a new site from Git. Select GitHub, get it authenticated, and I can put the repo that I'm searching for here. So select. The build commands are already pre-filled for me, so I'll go ahead and deploy site. All right, the site is deployed. So if I click on this, I should see the site, which is this one. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and then try and see if the Netlify functions I added actually work. So I'll do .netlify /functions. And what did we call the function? We called it greeting. Right, that's it. So this should now send back exactly good morning. Look at that. So that is exactly what we've specified here. So our Netlify function is working as expected in Svelte. So that's it. I wanted to just quickly show you how to use Netlify functions in your SvelteKit applications. And if you're wondering why, because I know that SvelteKit also has API routes that will give you the same functionality that you just get with Netlify functions, I made a little thing here to explain why that might be important, or it may not be the same for everyone. But like, imagine that you're migrating your application to SvelteKit from like a different stack, and you already have like Netlify functions that are already working for you in that stack. It would really just make sense to import them into your SvelteKit application as opposed to writing them all afresh as SvelteKit API routes. The second reason that you might be inspired to use Netlify functions in your SvelteKit application is you can author functions in more languages if you're writing Netlify functions, right? You can write in Go, in Rust, in TypeScript, as opposed to just writing them in JavaScript, which is what SvelteKit can only allow you to do. So if performance is important to you and you're trying to speed up your function running times, you can build them in Rust, you can author them in Go, and those have always been known to be faster than JavaScript. Also, it gives you more configuration options like using Netlify redirects and Netlify rewrites. Depending on how you're architecting your project, these things can come in handy for you. All right, that's it. So in summary, I want to say that with SvelteKit, we can cater for both the developer experience and the user experience, right? If you wanted dynamic functionalities, you have access to it. If you want static experiences, you have access to it as well. You can make the best use of the multiple rendering modes that SvelteKit supports by default. SSR, CSR, SSG, whatever works for you is available on a per page basis. And finally, it gives you the best of both worlds, as we've seen in these 3 different scenarios. So thank you all very much for having me. Once again, my name is Ekene, and I'm available on socials at Kenny_IO. If you have any questions, I'll be there in the chat section to respond to you. Thank you for having me, and bye.
All right, that was a great talk. I had no idea Copilot could do that. That was great. So you guys use Netlify? Yeah. It's pretty nice compared to like way back when you had to use like FTP and such things. But yeah, so our next talk is about test-driven development in Svelte.
In this session, I will be showing how to apply test-driven development in a Svelte application having external API interactions with it. Hello, my name is Basar Büyükkahraman. I've been teaching web technologies by applying test-driven development. And thank you for joining this session. We are going to create a simple component. It will be loading random users from this public API, random user me, whenever we click the button. And in each request, this API returns random user back. The project is based on Svelte template. It has additional dependencies for the test environment, like we have the jest, the Svelte testing library, and the mock service worker. Test configurations are also set in the project as well. You can check the description for the repository. And right here in the browser, the application is running. And right behind me, we have the test console. Let's move it to the front. Now it's time to see TDD in action. I will be doing the implementation in this app Svelte, and for testing this component, adding a new file here, app.spec.js. The test runner is detecting the files having the extension of .test.js or .spec.js, and then runs them. With test-driven development, we start coding by adding the test case for the requirement. And let's do that. Let's import the render and screen functionalities from testing library. And then let's import our component. Now let's add our test. It has load random user button. So in this page, we will have a button which is having this text load random user. First, we are going to render our component. This function, this render, is rendering the app to document body. In this document, we are going to query the button, and we get that button by using this query function coming from the screen. screen is containing the query functionalities, and we are using this query by role here. We are using accessibility roles in our test, and the component we are looking for is having the role of button, and also it has the load random user text on it. And finally, we can do the assertion. We are expecting this button to be in the document. Now let's save this one, and the test is automatically running, and here we can see the test is failing because we don't have the button on the component. Now let's implement this. Now just clearing the app, and let's add just simple button to this component and saving it. Now we have the button and the test is passing. Consider this one as a warm-up. Let's add a more interesting test. So going back to our test. Now let's add functionality to this button. Let's add our next test. It displays title, first and last name of user. This one has async await in it. This username will be visible after async API request is completed. Again, we are going to render app, then we will get the button. This time we are going to click this one, and it will make an HTTP request to random user me. But in test environment, we don't want a real HTTP request to be gone to actual server, because this would make the test environment fragile. We cannot control the external dependencies, so we cannot have predictable tests. Our tests may end up with false negative results. For solution, we can use mocking, and we can mock the HTTP client. Let's use Axios in the application. So in the test, first let's import the Axios. We are going to use the get functionality of the Axios. So we are going to replace the existing Axios get function. And we are assigning a mock function to it. As a result, this is going to be resolving this value. This is not the whole random user API response. It is just a part just needed for this case. This result value is exactly what Axios get is returning. It is having this data wrapping the actual API response. Now we mock the Axios. Let's click the button. For that, we are going to use fire event functionality of the testing library. And right here, we are going to click the button by using the fire event. After clicking the button, we are going to look for full username. This is going to be visible after async API call is completed. To await this text to appear, we are going to call await screen find by text. And the text we are looking for is just the merged version of the title, first and the last. And we expect this user full name to be in the document. Now let's save this one. So this is failing. Let's fix it. We will use Axios in this component, and we will have this local state for the user object. And let's have this function load random user for loading the user from backend. We get the user from random user me. Let's call this function onClick for our button. And if we have the user, let's display full username. Let's save this one. The test is passing. Now let's test this on browser. Here clicking the load random user, and here we are seeing this username. And if we click this one more time, we are receiving another user. So we completed the implementation. But instead of Axios, we could have used fetch. It is part of the browser functionality, so we don't need additional dependency in our project to make HTTP call to backend servers. Let's do that. Let's comment out this part. And let's do the same thing with fetch. So we are using fetch here, then we get the body from fetch response like this, then we take the user from the body result array. And let's save this one. Now our test is failing, but let's try this one in browser. Just clicking this load random user, and here it is working. We are receiving new user whenever we click this load random user. So this fetch is properly working, but our test is failing because our test is dependent onto the Axios. Now we are not using Axios, therefore we need to refactor our test to make it work with the current implementation. Now let's fix this one. Instead of using Axios, let's go with a better solution. Let's use mock service worker. First, let's remove this import and let's get setup server and rest from the mock service worker dependency. And in the test, before rendering the app, let's create server. There will be REST get handler, and this will be handling the request for this random user me. This is going to be intercepting the request, and the actual request won't be delivered to the backend. This one is going to be returning the response. And let's start this server in listening mode. Now we don't need this mock part. We don't need anything about the HTTP client in our test. Now let's save this one. And here we can see the test is passing. Just like we have tested on browser, it is working. So now our test is not dependent onto the HTTP client we are using. Currently the test is passing and we are using fetch. Now let's go back to Axios. So just commenting out the fetch part and uncommenting the Axios usage here. Let's say this. And this one is also passing. We completed this tiny project by applying test-driven development. As you practice it more, it becomes second nature in your coding routine. And in test codes, if you stay away as much as possible with the implementation details, then you will be able to implement the requirements however you want. That's all from me. Thanks for watching.
Hey, great talk about testing.
Really good.
Yep.
I have a question. That's why I'm here on stage. I like TDD a lot.
Yep.
Is the testing library that he showed, like, is that the convention in Svelte nowadays, or what do you typically use?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think there's actually a definite answer, fortunately. I usually do my testing in Cypress, which isn't really test-driven development, I guess. Well, could, but it's not the same, right?
What are some good options, though?
So I think there's a version of Ken C. Dodd's testing library. Maybe that was what he was using now. And there's also Jest, of course, and a bunch of others. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So we're going to have a short 5-minute break, and then we're going to continue with SEO for developers. So stay tuned. All right, so we're back after our 5-minute break. Maybe it was a 10-minute break, I don't know. We'll just keep on going with SEO for developers.
My name's Nick Reese, and today we're going to be talking about SEO for developers. I've titled this talk the 80-20 of getting results, keeping your stakeholders happy, and avoiding shooting yourself in the foot. In this, I'm going to share a little bit about my background, my experiences in growing SEO assets, who I am, and Luke Edwards is going to take over the second half of this this presentation. And hopefully there's not too much background noise. I just moved to Andorra, a little country in Europe. Please don't Google it right now if you don't know where it's at, or you can if you want. But it's a little country between Spain and France, and there's a bunch of road construction going on outside my apartment. So hopefully this audio is good. If not, I apologize in advance. All right, let's jump into it. First, my name is Nick Reese. I'm a startup guy and an SEO at heart. For the past 15 years, I've been building performance marketing websites, commonly also known as affiliate marketing, but I feel like that gets a pretty bad rap. Essentially, my main business model has been taking huge data sets from the US government and other sources and making them useful for users. Prior to now, I worked on broadbandnow.com, businessinternet.com, and a whole bunch of other sites that unfortunately I have NDAs and can't talk about. I've often joked that SEO has paid the bills since I've had bills to pay, meaning that basically since I was in college, SEO has paid my bills, and I've never really done anything else besides SEO and everything that kind of goes under that umbrella. over the years, I've taught myself JavaScript, but I'm really a marketing guy at heart. And yeah, all the lessons I've learned over the years have been from building SEO websites. I think now I'm well over 30 major SEO sites under my belt. And so I've seen a lot of things. I haven't seen everything. And every SEO tends to have their own opinions on what's good and bad. And I wear my own tinfoil hat. But in this talk, my goal is to share a little bit about my lessons in scaling my own network of SEO sites using a framework I built for Svelte. So a little bit about that framework. Elder.js is a static site generator slash server-side rendering framework for Svelte. It was designed with large content sites in mind, and it ships with partial hydration and 0 kilobytes of JavaScript if it's not needed. Has a very clean data flow that's super modular. So if you have huge data sets, like we're talking billions of rows on my 2 public projects, or billions of data points, hundreds of millions of rows, it works really well. Insanely fast build times. The use of SSR is, you can definitely upgrade directly to that should your site outgrow static site generation. And most importantly, it's been built with 0 SEO compromises in mind. Essentially, in 2018 timeframe, I ended up building porting a quite major site over to Gatsby from WordPress, and it was just full of SEO issues that kept getting pushed to the core of Gatsby that really made it hard to troubleshoot. Those included issues with the default service worker and issues with the canonical tags changing the way that they suggested it in a small patch update. So Elder.js will never really cause those issues for you. That's our goal, is that if none of these things should break and cause you SEO headaches. And since this is Svelte Summit, I want to go ahead and plug Elder.js for who it's right for and who it's not right for. First, if you're building an app, I would suggest you look at some of the other tools out there, such as SvelteKit. Elder.js really isn't designed for tons and tons of interactivity that goes on with common apps. But my standard advice is, if you're going to build an app, you're probably going to find a lot more tutorials on how to build an app with SvelteKit or Sapper than you will with Elder.js. So I kind of point users in that direction. It's also great for you if only islands or parts of each of your pages are interactive. And if you have a content-heavy site that changes infrequently, because content-heavy sites that change infrequently are perfect for static sites generators. We definitely use Elder.js in a server-side rendering fashion, so it is totally capable, and I actually love it. But it's not for everyone. It's very opinionated to solve the specific issues that I encounter when I'm building my sites. First and foremost, this tool was designed to build major SEO sites. So if you're building a small 10-page site, you might be better served by some different frameworks. But if you're building a 5,000-page site or more, or even a 1,000-page site, and you're tired of really slow build times, Elder.js is also right for you. Could be right for you. Now, normally what I say when I talk about SEO is, because I'm going to make a little joke here, and it's a dad joke. I have kids, so I'm allowed to do this now. Essentially, I always say that in affiliate marketing, being vague is about as good as that other thing, because that's pretty vague. Now, for SEO, I always say it's do cool shit and tell people about it. And that's what I tell at marketing conferences. And I have a whole talk on do cool shit and tell people about it, and how that kind of dovetails into outreach, and how that can really be your core SEO strategy. But since this is a developer conference, let's talk like nitty gritty. Let's talk what actually matters. And in sitting down to write this talk, there's 3 things that really stand out to me, and the thing that I tell my dev team all the time. First, let's not neglect our on-page signals. This means let's make sure the title tag is good, the H1's good, and the meta description's good. By good is relative, but every single page on your site, this isn't really a development tip, but every single page on your site should have a purpose for existing. It should have a specific keyword it's trying to rank for, and it should support your overall business objective. So for us, sites, every single page on our site either is designed to get links, it's designed to make money, or it's designed to support the overall strategy. Those are really the 3 core strategies or types of pages that we have. And the title tag, H1, and meta description should support whatever the strategy is for that individual page. Second, from a developer perspective, have a system to surface common but hard to detect mistakes. Like a good example of this one that will actually absolutely crush you is if, let's say, your canonical tags are messed up. I've seen it happen multiple times. Canonical tag basically tells Google, hey, this page, the place you will always be able to find it is here. Well, what happens if a user enters your page with a query string, the thing that comes after the question mark in the URL? Google uses the canonical tag to say, don't show the URL that has a question mark. Instead, just show this URL. Well, if you mess that up, you can have some pretty major issues. There's some other things that are in here, but another one that's really common and often hard to detect if you don't have a system for it is when data is missing, especially with JavaScript frameworks. So you'll end up with undefineds or nulls in your title tag, meta description, or really anywhere on your page. The third thing for developers is make sure it's easy for bots to crawl and understand your site. Now, the biggest part of this comes down to properly managing your internal linking structure, which I can give a whole talk on. Like I've done consulting where all I do is talk about that for 8 hours. So we're not going to talk about it in detail today, but in short, watch for orphaned pages, which is incredibly easy to do with a statically generated site. An orphaned page is a page that has no incoming links from anywhere else on your site. And the other good rule to think about is your highest priority pages should get more links across your site. And another thing here is that's common with Svelte that I talked to our dev team about is make sure you're always shipping all of the HTML you want indexed when you ship the page. In other words, when the server or the CDN responds with your HTML, make sure all the HTML you want indexed is there. And in server-side rendering context, it's very easy to end up with a Svelte if statement that hides content. So we generally have a rule that instead of using if statements to hide content, we use variables that add a display none property to things, and that way at least the content is in the HTML. You can get a little bit more advanced, but I can talk about those another time if people are curious. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the lessons that I've learned from scaling SEO properties with Elder.js. Right now I have quite a few major SEO properties running on Elder.js. Some are in cooking mode that are basically sitting there growing in traffic, and others are like the main focus. But essentially the thing I've learned over the years, whether it's on the properties I'm learning on right now or not, is that you need a way to surface common SEO problems automatically to your team. In Broadband nowadays, we had a full-time SEO, and all he did was audit the site after every single build. Looking back at that, we long-term, we automated it using Screaming Frog, which is an SEO crawling software, but we still had to manually parse those logs, and we wrote some scripts to pull out common issues. Now I'm fully of the mind that common SEO issues should be surfaced in the CI/CD pipeline. So every time you're building, essentially, if there's an SEO issue, the build should not go live. That's my belief now. And from that, a tool has evolved, and Elder.js has quite a few different capabilities, but one of which I didn't even talk about on the Elder.js slide is hooks and plugins. And so I developed a plugin from our internal tool that checks over 50 common SEO issues, and it lives perfectly in your CI/CD pipeline. This is extracted from our internal larger tool that does a whole lot more things. But many different users have told me that it's like a core reason why they like SEO, and it's made it a lot easier for them as developers to have confidence in their work. So in releasing that, there was a lot of people that wanted to customize the rules, and I ended up, I've become quite good friends with Luke Edwards, who's pretty active in the Svelte community. He works for Cloudflare on the workers, and you've probably seen him, but you're going to hear from him in just a minute. We started talking about, it's really a shame that this is only kind of exclusive to Elder.js, and I wonder if there's a way that we could make this more framework agnostic. Anyone that's using a static site generator, they should have a tool that allows them to keep themselves from shooting themselves in the foot. And so Luke has dove in, and we've worked together for several months to create a tool. And so now you're going to get to hear from Luke, and he'll show you the tool and how it works.
Cool. Hi, everyone. My name is Luke Edwards. As Nick mentioned, he and I have been working together for a little bit on some SEO stuff. In typical Nick fashion, he breezed over his existing work here, but the SEO space has had a lot of progress, and that's completely Nick's fault. Many of us may be familiar with the SEO check plugin for Elder.js. It does a bunch of stuff, like 100 different rules. Very Elder specific in how it's actually implemented, but the core of it is Nick's other package called SEOlint with a hyphen. It does all the same stuff, but from SEOlint, we created SEOlint without a hyphen. So thanks again, Nick. Made it super easy. Yeah, definitely helped out the ecosystem. Cool. So how does it work? Well, let me show real quick. There is some help text, and it takes some inputs and some options. Great. Well, with those inputs, it can be a directory, it could be a file, it could be directories and a file, it could be a single URL or multiple of them. You can pipe a curl into it directly, or you can do some more complex binding patterns. Let's start with some bad examples. Mine. So SEOlint on HTTPS, luki.com. I have issues. Specifically, well, importantly, I have a red X there. That means on my system, that means that is an exit code of 1. So what does that mean? That means SEOlint out of the box is really great for CI/CD systems. As Nick mentioned, and this was advice given to me a while back, really thankful for it. If there are problems in your build system, do not deploy, especially if there were not problems there to begin with. You do not want to launch SEO problems into the world. That's what happened here on my site. So what's happening here is the rule called canonical href match does not actually match the host name. Well, host name is luki.com, and my canonical tag is pointing to www.luki.com, and now I'm stuck with it for having made it a long time ago. Either way, stuck with it. And because I'm stuck with it, I can actually go in and turn off this rule. So SEOlint, sounds a lot like ESLint, right? And so we have a config file system that operates a lot like ESLint. So we have rules right now, and I'm just gonna quickly turn off this rule and rerun the check. What's happening here, by the way, is SEOlint is like fetching this URL in the background, and only this URL in the background, parses it as HTML, traverses it, applies all of the default configuration rules, sees if there are any issues. If there are, it reports them. Otherwise, there aren't. Celebrates you. Looks great. Ta-da. No red X anymore. Cool. So this would be exit code 0. CI/CD would continue as normal because there is not a problem. If we look at some other sites, of course, we have Nick's properties. They're perfect as you expect. elderguy.com, so this is multiple sites. It's not the entire site yet. It's one URL at a time. You can use other systems to pipe that stuff in there. But HTTPS, my site once again with the rule turned back on, and only my site is failing because of that same canonical tag issue. Bummer. Anyway, if we look back at the help text, we can also see it run on directories. Directories are recursive with SEOlint, which is really helpful, so you don't have to pipe a bunch of stuff individually. So for that, we have an example here. It is the SvelteKit starter template. The only thing I've done to this here is attach the static adapter. So if I run this, serve, there we go, on port 5000, refresh, it's our favorite starter app. Cool. So now if I run SEOlint on that same directory, examples, build, it does everything. This is just saying like, hey, we don't know what the host name is. The formatting will change by the time this tool goes out. But in any event, this site gets built during CI/CD, whatever. Run this as a post-build hook on top of that build output directory, and you will block yourself from deploying. Again, fix these things or turn them off, whatever you want. It's just a real quick and easy way to make sure your site's in good health. So that's a directory. We can run it on a specific file. So the build index.html file only runs that. We can do a subdirectory. There's the about page or the about index file. So each of these are specific things. It runs the same way. It's just like how much recursiveness do you want? Is really what it comes down to. Other cool things. There's a programmatic API. So you can run the FS for file system or the URL stuff directly. You can use run and lint commands, and both of those will give you reports, and a report will map the failing source, whether it's a URL or a file, and the messages that error out. And those are the exact same things that we use here to display these errors. So you don't lose anything by using the CLI. Pretty cool. Last thing we should show is the config file stuff. So again, like ESLint, there's presets and plugins. So presets, I don't have any actually installed here, but presets are a way for you to have like your company specific rules, or your team specific, or your personal, whoever, doesn't matter. And then we have plugins, and this can be plugin.foo and plugin.bar. So like ESLint, presets go first, they apply first, plugins override presets. So presets can be made of other plugins, other presets, and like individual rules. Then plugins apply, and then your rules within your project have the final say. So example here, if let's say this SEO lint preset thing was setting this to true or keeping it to true. By setting it to false here, like I've guaranteed that there's just not going to have, the lukey.com example will not have issues, and then vice versa, right? Like, so let's say the shared preset wants it to be off, I can override it here and make sure that it is in fact on. That's about it. It's customizable. You can run it programmatically. You can run it as a post-build hook. It's very fast, very lightweight. Should work with anything you're using, even if it's not SvelteKit, or even if it's, server-side rendered. Nick and I are interested in collecting more feedback while this is in early phase of development. So there should be a Google form link on the screen, but we are interested to hear how you guys would like to use this. What other rules would you like us to apply by default? It's just an easier way to start collecting feedback while this is in development. But of course, the GitHub repo will be active, will be open, but we want to hear how you and your teams may use this. But that's it. Thank you everyone for tuning in and watching. Enjoy the rest of the summit. Bye.
Nice. I wish I had that for when I built Svelte Summit, the website. Unfortunately, I didn't. So have any of you heard about Elder.js before? A few of you. So there's the story behind Elder.js is pretty funny. Nick made this Elder Guide website where it's basically a website for finding a care home for your relatives, like your grandmother or your grandpa. And so he decided to put the Elder.js documentation on that website. So if you go to elderguide.com/tech, you'll actually find it there. So I think he did that as an SEO experiment. Not sure if it worked out or not because it's very different. Anyway, so our last talk of the day is about the history of Svelte. So we're going to hear how Svelte has changed these last 5 years. So I don't know if you knew that, but Svelte is actually 5 years old. So yeah, let's check that out.
Hi, I am glad to be part of Svelte Summit again, this time with a short presentation about how Svelte has changed in the past 5 years and how it has been used at Itslearning. I have to add a small disclaimer, however, that I do no longer work for Itslearning, but the company has been so nice as to give me permission to talk about them during this presentation. Itslearning is a platform that handles several aspects of education. There are systems to grade and follow students, give homework, provide lecture material, communication with parents, attendance, and many other features. It is used at many different levels of education, from primary school to universities and even adult education. The company was founded in 1999 and currently has over 30 developers. It is mainly active in Europe but has customers worldwide. At peak moments, around 400,000 of the 7 million users are using the platform together. It goes to say that this is not just some hobby project, this is a real application used by millions of people. It is also from 1999, so it has a lot of old code. Big parts of the application are still written in ASP.NET and use jQuery to handle the front-end parts. These things cannot be simply rewritten in a modern framework because it has so much functionality that it would take years to redevelop the entire application, and the customer wants to see new features on a regular basis and maintenance, especially considering this is such a crucial part for lots of schools. Think of during the COVID pandemic, when lots of people had to have school from home. It was a very important tool for them. However, in 2016, we started looking at ways to modernize the front end. We could have chosen established frameworks like React or Angular, but out of nowhere came Svelte, and we loved it. One of the main reasons we chose Svelte was the promise of small bundles. For many of our end users that are on slow connections, computers, or mobile devices, that was an absolute must. I'll have a look at some of the differences we saw over the years using different versions of Svelte. To do so, my former colleagues provided me with a source code of the Your Students page. This is a simple page listing your courses and students, with some functionality like searching, filtering, sorting. Because of its simplicity, it was rewritten in each version of Svelte to serve as an example for other teams. I will not be showing the entire code as that would take hours to dissect, but rather draw inspiration from it to highlight some of the differences. Let's start at the basics. How does a component look like? Here is version 3. We import components, we export props, we use them in our markup. And if you have lots of props you want to pass to children, you can spread them in those children. If you go back to version 2, we had to do export default, list all the components used there, and export the properties as a data function. You also see in the markup, there is no more the possibility to spread the props into a component. If you look at the actual code, you'll see that sometimes the children have like 10, 15 properties, and this makes for a long code. The spreading was a very good addition to Svelte. If we go even further back in time, we see the appearance of double queries. If you look at the markup, you will see that course.title there does not have double queries. It should have, but it doesn't because I made a mistake here. We also use the extension HTML to import components. This was done for syntax highlighting reasons, as we did not have the tools back then that we have now. Reactive variables are taken for granted nowadays and are very easy to work with. $, colon, name of the variable, equals, whatever you want this variable to equal. But if you go back in time, we see that in version 2 and in version 1 for that matter, They were called computed variables. They had to be declared as computed variables in this exported object. Then you had the name of the variable as a property, and then a function, where the dependents are the argument, and then you have the function result is your computed variable. Firing events in version 3 is easy, albeit a bit cumbersome maybe with the create event dispatcher thing. Here we see select course, dispatch, select, and we pass the course as an argument to be used in detail. Here is the same code, but for version 2. We see several things differently here. All the methods are declared as a method of the component, and we use this.fire instead of a dispatcher. Another very important difference here is that when we look at the markup, we see onSelect and then a function call instead of a function reference like we have them now. Now, this is one of the biggest differences between version 2 and version 3, except of course for this whole export default thing. And it caused a lot of bugs during the transition of from 2 to 3. We still see now that beginners in Svelte often put their functions like this, thinking this will work, but we all know that this doesn't work. You have to put a handler in there. Using variables in the scripts is quite easy. Here is version 3. I'm not sure what I can tell about this. It's easy. Active equals not active, and it's changed. In version 1 and version 2, you have to use this.get and then the property you want to get, and this.set with an object that you set the state of the component to. This code will only change the properties that are listed in the this.set. So ID and visited in this case will still remain the same. A favorite feature in Svelte are stores. There are writable stores, derived stores, readable stores. The V3 version of your students uses stores extensively. I think there are about 10 different kinds of stores used, and they are easy to work with. However, in version 2, there was only one store type. It was called store. And we would often just make one global store for the entire site that contained all the data used on this page. You would pass the store as a separate property to a component, and then it would be available for all descendants of that component. That meant that you could have a store declared on the application level, and then, for instance, in a subsection of the page, you could have another store defined. We did not do that, however, in Itslearning. As a final thing, let's have a look at lifecycle methods. Here we have the onMount. The onMount uses student list. Student list is a reference to a DOM element. It was declared as a variable, and then using bind this, we bound the DOM element to this variable. In version 2, we use ref : to reference a DOM element. And then we use this.refs in the code to get this reference, preferably with the correct variable, because this code will for surely not work as we expected. Where it concerns the lifecycle methods, it's just onCreate, onDestroy, onUpdate, and so on. It's fairly straightforward. I have to note there is a bind directive in Svelte 2, but it's only used to keep input values in sync with properties of the component. That concludes a very quick overview of some of the differences of Svelte over the years. There are many more details, but it is clear that Svelte has evolved a lot in those 5 years, and it has always been a pleasure to work with, and it will always stay a pleasure to work with.
All right, so that was horrifying. It reminds me of certain other legacy frameworks, maybe? I don't know. All right, so that was the last talk of the day, but we also have a Q&A before we finish off the stream. So yeah, do you guys have any questions about any of the talks or any other questions, or do you have any questions on there?
I don't really have questions, but it would have been cool to see more production code in the last talk, like what they've actually built and see the app and see how they've done it, like the hardest parts that they had when building it and how they solved it as well. That would have been cool.
Yeah, so Itslearning is, I've never heard about them before, but apparently they're this huge learning platform. I don't know if any of you guys know about it, but yeah, so they've been using Svelte for 5 years, and people keep saying Svelte isn't production ready or something. I don't know. Doesn't really seem like it is. So yeah, I mean that it is production ready. Sorry.
I haven't spoken with everybody here in the audience, but at least 3 people are actually using it in production. So it is production ready, I would say.
Yeah, I'm using it. It's production ready on Svelte Summit.
But you don't have SEO there, right?
No, unfortunately not, no. But yeah, so before that, I used to work at a low-code company called BuddyBase that also used Svelte for this super complex application. It's also open source if you want to see like a very, very complex Svelte application in the wild.
Does the audience have questions?
Doesn't look like it. Oh, there's one in the back.
Or Kevin, can you tell us about next Svelte Summit?
Maybe you should repeat the question for those who weren't here.
That's good. So what can I tell you about the next Svelte Summit? So the next Svelte Summit will be an in-person event here in Stockholm, actually. So hopefully we'll get a bunch of people from all over the world who will come here and enjoy Svelte, unless Omicron gets the better of us, of course. So yeah.
So what do you think is the biggest obstacle to get people or get your team to switch to Svelte from some other framework? And what is your recommendation for how to handle that and get your team going into Svelte and switching to Svelte? Like, do you have any recommendations for how to get everyone on board to see that Svelte is a good alternative to other frameworks?
Yeah, so in short, the question is for the audience online, how to get people that aren't already using Svelte into Svelte, and how to convert your team into using Svelte. So I'd probably start on like the micro front end side and just make small parts of your site in Svelte and then import them. That's pretty easy. And I think you actually have done this, so maybe you can tell me if it's a good idea or a bad idea. Yeah, sorry, what was the second part? Maybe there wasn't a second part to that question.
No, it was basically, do you have any kind of great tips for getting those lost parts of your team to discover Svelte?
Yeah, so getting the last few people to convert to real Sveltians. So yeah, I mean, if they're not converted by trying it, I'm not sure how you would do it. Try it, yeah. Because once you try it, you don't really want to go back most of the time, at least in my experience. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I have a question about migrating from Zapper and Svelte to SvelteKit, because we've used Zapper and SvelteKit production for a couple of years now, and Yeah, have you any experience migrating, or does anyone else, like, what are the benefits, what are other than cost of build times?
Yeah, so migrating from Sapper to SvelteKit.
Yeah.
So are you asking more about like the problems or?
Yeah, both the problems and the benefits,
Yeah.
experiences.
So I haven't done that personally, but I know there are core team members that have done that. For example, there's a site called Beyond, where the CTO is a core maintainer, and they've gone from Sapper to SvelteKit. And I don't exactly remember what he told me about what the issues are. I'll probably have to get back to you on that. Maybe you've tried converting it?
Not yet.
Not yet. No. All right. I suppose the biggest one is probably that SvelteKit runs in non-node environments, right? So you could run SvelteKit on Cloudflare workers or other environments. So if you're using node packages, then you're out of luck. Basically, you'll have to find other solutions there.
Once you have tried converting it, you're welcome here on stage and
Yes.
give me a talk about it.
Definitely. Yeah. Other questions? No? All right. Yeah, sorry.
I'm less familiar with Svelte, but a little bit familiar with Vue. Can you tell us about how do they compare, or key differences? Because they seem very similar in spirit or in values.
Yeah.
If you happen to know.
I've only used Vue 2 and very briefly, so I'm not familiar with Vue 3, but from what I understand, Evan Vue took a lot of inspiration from Svelte when he brought some of the fun features back into Vue. But I can't really talk in specifics.
When I see the fourth talk, the 5 years of Itslearning, the Vue 2 is very similar with Svelte 2.
Yeah, so yeah, maybe that was a legacy framework. No, I'm just joking.
I guess there is a lot of healthy cross-pollination of ideas.
Yeah, for sure. Just look at like Next.js and SvelteKit and Nuxt, I guess that's
But that's because Vercel is employing all of them nowadays, right?
Yeah, I guess they own the internet.
Any more questions from here? I have a few questions. And I also forgot, I need to have my cheat sheet, I'm getting old. I forgot to mention that, of course, Baltic is hiring, I have to say it, but it's a great company. If you're interested in knowing more, come and talk with me. But on to the questions. We have these mini conferences planned Wednesdays. What are the plans? Can you tell us more? And what are some other talks to look forward to?
Yeah, so we plan to have these mini events, like mini Svelte Summit events, almost every week up until Christmas and maybe even after Christmas as well. And we have a couple of interesting talks that I'll have to double check here. So for example, we have Web3 and NFTs and magic and some weird concoction of things. And then bringing Svelte to enterprise. So that's a really interesting one where they will hear from a guy that works on Schneider Electric and where they use Svelte. And then there's also building reliable SvelteKit applications using Cypress. So that's like a test talk, I suppose.
Cool. I heard you're becoming full-time Svelter. What does that mean? What will you be doing?
Yeah, so last week or the week before, just after Svelte Summit, I announced I'm going full-time and working at Svelte Society, which means I'm just, my job is basically to just go around marketing Svelte, running meetups and helping people out with Svelte. So if you have any ideas or questions or talks that are things that you want to do with Svelte, just reach out and we'll figure something out.
In how many countries or cities are there like Svelte societies?
That's a good question.
Give or take.
Give or take. All of them? No. So I don't know, maybe 10. It depends. Some are more outspoken, and we see them a lot more often. So there's one in France, there's one in Germany, the US, of course, the UK here. And there's also a huge Russian community as well that we don't really interact a lot with. So if any of you speak Russian and know Svelters over there, I'm very excited and interested in talking to you. Yeah.
And what's the status of SvelteKit 1.0?
$1 million question. I don't know. No, there are some issues that need to be solved before 1.0 can be released. But I think now that Rich Harris works full-time on Svelte, I think it'll happen sooner rather than later. Even though like he first showed SvelteKit over a year ago, I think, and it's still not 1.0. So yeah, we'll see.
You mentioned Schneider Electric. Are there any other big companies that have started using Svelte lately that you've heard of?
So there's Schneider Electric, and then of course Itslearning. They're very large. Alaska Airlines is another one. IKEA actually has some Svelte on their international website. Like if you go to the the landing page of IKEA.com, you open up the inspector, you can developer tools, you can see Svelte in there. What else? There's a pretty large ML/AI company called Hugging Face that use Svelte a lot on their properties. Not sure they're not very well known though, so I'm not sure.
Those were all the questions I have, but can you come up with anything else that we should know about or that you want to inform us about?
Not really. I think if you want to do a talk, you should definitely do a talk here at the meetup. We're not going to live stream all of the talks, so if you don't feel comfortable being seen on YouTube or anything, that's fine. And yeah, so you had a question? Yeah.
So what do you think is the biggest misconception about Svelte? How would you address that?
The biggest misconception about Svelte, yeah. So I definitely say that people don't think it's production ready, but it definitely is. And another big one that people bring up is the lack of packages or like UI libraries. The community is small or stuff like that. I haven't found that to be true. I think there are lots of packages, and Svelte is very easy to integrate with regular vanilla JavaScript as well. So you have that whole side of the equation as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So I guess with that, we'll finish off the mini event. Thank you all for coming, and get some pizza.